as we've said, or as you said numerous times, Eze is your number one pick. I think there was a report this morning on Tuesday morning from James McNicholas saying that because Waneri is set to sign this new deal, Arsenal don't have as big a need for this sort of midfielder attacker hybrid because of course Waneri with this new deal he would expect lots of minutes if he's been promised a sort of pathway to the team. But in your view, even though Waneri is looking likely to sign this new deal, should Arsenal still be going for an Eze or Simons type player?
Yes, absolutely. Yes, I think there's space in the squad for it, especially in Eze because I just think he's just different to Ethan. I don't see Eze coming in as sort of blocking Ethan's pathway. I think I see both players playing on different sides of the pitches, to be honest. So I think there is absolutely a need for it. I look at Arsenal's squad and I look at that left eight position especially, and it's not that creative, the options they've got there. You've got Declan Rice, brilliant player, not the most creative player. Obviously turning more and more into a box crashing midfielder, which is great, scoring lots of goals, which is great. But creativity wise, aside from set pieces, not brilliant. Same goes for Mikel Merino. Really good player, showed his worth last season, scores goals, all that sort of stuff. But a real sort of mercurial playmaker type player to have as an option in that position. Arsenal just don't have that, so they can't really change games, or there's not really any sort of unpredictability there for me. So I think there's absolutely space for an Eze type player who could play in that position, could play out on the left wing as well if needed. It might take a sale. It might be that a Leandro Trossard has to go for that to happen. Which, as much as I don't really want Trossard to go, if it's a case of Trossard has to go for Eze to come in, then I think that's an acceptable sacrifice, if you see what I mean. But I definitely see there's space in that squad still. There's just that is the big gaping hole for me. The one sort of area that Arsenal lack is another real creative option who can come into the central areas, share the burden with Odegaard, potentially play with Odegaard at times, especially when you're struggling against a low block or something like that, which we know Arsenal do, and you've got to try and find a way to open a game up. You're struggling. You can completely change things that way, from taking off a Rice and bringing on an Eze, or starting even an Eze and giving Rice a rest, and just being unpredictable and completely changing the way you play. I think that's a really important thing for Arsenal. When I look at what the transfer business they've done this summer, I think a lot of it, with the addition of Madueke, the hopeful addition of Gyökeres as well, and if you could get Eze, I think that feels very deliberate ways of trying to solve the issues that we saw Arsenal struggle with last season, especially around the low block.
I mean, I'll be honest, you've answered one of my next questions perfectly. I was going to ask about if it would take an exit for like a Trossard or a Martinelli for Arsenal to bring someone like Eze or Simons in. And you mentioned Trossard there, of course, he is in the last year of his contract. There were reports a few months ago saying that Arsenal could tie him down to a long-term extension, but there's been no progress there. The talk recently, at least, has been about him potentially leaving. I think there's been a lot of links with Bayern Munich in particular. But like you say, it would be a worthy sacrifice if Trossard was to leave for an Eze or a Xavi Simons to come in. I think the thing with Trossard is he is very rarely injured. Like he's so reliable fitness wise. I mean, would that be a really good argument to keep him, or even if there is say an offer of maybe 15, 20 million for him, is it worth letting him go, even though he is almost always going to be at Arteta's disposal?
Like I said, I wouldn't let him go unless it was absolutely guaranteed that someone else was coming in. But I think, as much as I think he's a really good player, a fantastic player, I think he's been a brilliant signing. And like you said, the availability is so good with him, as he showed last season when everyone else around him was dropping like flies. Leo was the one sort of constant in that squad and in that team. So I would, I wouldn't want to force him out the door at all. I still think he's got loads to offer. He's versatile. He scores goals. He sets goals up. But if it meant you could get Eze, I think it's an acceptable sacrifice, especially with Madueke coming in, who is, I do think is going to be considered quite a lot as a left-sided option for Arsenal as well. You've then got an Eze if he comes in. You've got a Martinelli. You've got Madueke. You've got left-sided options there, even if Trossard goes. So, yeah, I think it would be acceptable. I wouldn't be celebrating it by any means because I think Arsenal would be losing a very, very good player. But I think what it would do to the squad, how it would change things, I think it would be an acceptable departure.